Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan from CampSite. Today we are going to go over the Phase 1 training. So, everyone should be able to see my screen. Training at camp, good afternoon, CampSite. So, um, the warning I try to give with everyone is just that not everything will look exactly the way that it does in your database, just because I may have some modules active in my training account that you may not have in your real account and things like that. So, but functionality wise, everything is the same. And anytime that I go over something that may not apply to everyone, I'll do my best to point that out as much as possible. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So this is the first page that you see when you log in to your database. It is what we call the Welcome to CampSite landing page. When you log in, it should say your name here at the top when it greets you as you log in. On the left-hand side of the page, we have your 12 to 13 most recently visited pages. We do this because you may not know the names of all the pages that you've been working on, especially if you're new to the software, or if you're working with a family who has a fairly common last name, you can just jump back to the link to their profile instead of researching for them and things like that. So again, just to kind of jump back to places that you had already seen earlier that day. On the right-hand side, we have CampSite updates. We try to make updates to the software about every 3 weeks or so, give or take. And our updates range from small little improvements to large feature requests that you've been working on, that we've been working on for some time. It'll always display the most recent update first, and then if you click on the orange arrow here on the right-hand side, then you can see the 10 most recent updates that we've made to the software. All of our updates come from feedback and suggestions that we get from our actual camps. So instead of guessing on what kind of features and things that people want to see, we collect that data, we talk about it constantly, and then we apply it to our development schedule. So if you ever have a suggestion or a feature request that you'd like to submit, you can always contact us, and we do take those seriously. So as I scroll down, below that is the training webinar schedule. This is a temporary section. It'll only be here while we're doing the webinars this fall. Once the webinars are over, this section will actually go away until next year when we redo the webinars. So if you're interested in signing up for some of the other trainings, just click on the register link like you did for this one. Below that is your upcoming tasks. We're going to dive into tasks a lot more on our second core training, which we call phase 2. But essentially a task is sort of like an online reminder or an online to-do list that you would be able to set on a per family or per staff member basis. This is a snapshot of every task assigned to you that is due today, due tomorrow, and any that would be considered past due as well. At the top, we have our permanent navigation bar. The permanent navigation bar allows you to navigate to the different areas, modules, and pages that you have access to see. So because of that, the navigation bar might not look the same for everyone. For higher level administrators, typically people with what we call DB management permissions, which I'll get into in just a second, they'll see everything that your database has access to see. But for other users, they may not have, for instance, if they don't need to see financial information, they might not see the financial dashboard here at the top. Or for my camps who have the medical module, not everyone may have access to the medical dashboard and the additional medical features. So again, it's common that the navigation bar doesn't look exactly the same for everyone. Not only does it depend on the modules that your database has, but it also depends on the permissions that you have in regard to those modules. So again, higher level administrators should have everything for that particular database. Now, having said that, there are a few things that are standard across all databases, regardless of your modules and regardless of your permissions. So, for instance, on the far left-hand side, we have this little house icon. The little orange house, when you click on it, will always bring you back to this page. This is considered your home page. So no matter where you are, if you want to come back here, just click on the little orange house. Next to that, we have what we call our Support Help Center. The Support Help Center has a lot of helpful articles, tutorials, and step-by-step videos on a lot of the core functionality of CampSite. This icon sort of looks like a little life preserver. So if you click on that, it should open up a completely brand new page. And again, it will break down all the different articles and tutorials into the different sections that we have. We like to tell our camps, especially newer ones, that this is sort of your first line of defense for any sort of questions that you may have on the software, not only for features that exist in your database, but also maybe some additional add-on modules that you might be curious to add in the future. We have actually done a lot of work on the Help Center, so it is an excellent resource and we recommend it to everyone who has access to the database. So if you have a question that for whatever reason you could not find in our Help Center, then you can also click on the blue question bubble here in the top left-hand corner of the navigation bar. This will allow you to send in a ticket to support. So you also have the ability to send in a ticket into support by simply emailing support@campmanagement.com, and that will notify the entire team. When you sign on with us, you are assigned to a dedicated training and support specialist. During the training period, we do recommend that you go back to them for any sort of questions that you might have. But once training is over and you have gone live or opened up your database, normally we recommend to email support instead of your individual rep, just because your questions will be answered in a more timely fashion, since again, the entire team is notified of your inquiry. So again, the blue question bubble, or simply emailing support@campmanagement.com. Next to that, we have a section which we call My Profile. When you are logged into your database, it will say your first and last name at your camp's initials. My first and last name always show up as CampSite support, which is why it says that. But when you are logged in, it will have your first and last name. And then your camp's initials will also be unique to your initials and was designated when you first signed up with us. So when you click on this link, it will bring you into a page that will allow you to first change your password. I apologize for the autofill that keeps happening to me. So this is to change your own password. So all passwords that exist within CampSite have to be at least 8 characters long, with 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, and 1 number. Those are the only criteria that we have for passwords. So, and again, obviously you can change that at any time. As I scroll down, again, this is a setting that we'll probably go over more in our next webinar, but essentially this deals with the navigation search bar. The navigation search bar is here on the right-hand side, and it allows you to jump to different family, camper, or staff profiles within your database, simply by searching by at least 3 characters. The default settings for this is that if I were to click on Jill Paulson's name, technically it brings me to the Paulson family profile first instead of Jill's individual camper profile. However, if I check this box and then click Update Settings, now when I would click on Jill, it would go directly to her profile instead of the family profile first. So technically speaking, it only saves you 1 click in the long run, but a lot of our camps prefer to just jump to a camper profile if they click on the camper name. So completely up to you. Below that is where you can sign up for our CampSite status updates. So if we're going to be making significant changes to a particular module, or if there are any issues with the availability of CampSite in general, we will notify you via status updates. So it doesn't happen very often. I think all of 2020, we were down maybe 3 hours across the entire year. So it's not very frequent, but when it does happen, we obviously want to notify you as quickly as possible. So we don't spam you with any CampSite opportunities or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. Again, it's just a way for you to be notified if there are any problems with CampSite or things that you might need to be aware of. So we do recommend that at least 1 or 2 higher level administrators sign up for status updates. That way they can be notified, again, in case there are problems. Below that is where you can where you can opt into our responsive design beta. Right now, the parent-facing side is completely mobile responsive, meaning that parents can use any device, smartphone, tablet, desktop, laptop, and have full functionality through CampSite, and it'll adapt based on whatever screen or whatever device they're using. Right now, we are in the process of doing that same overhaul redesign on the administrative side as well. Because the administrative side is a little bit more complicated, we haven't converted the entire admin side just yet. So it's not fully operational when it comes to the responsive design. Right now, if you log into CampSite on your phone, it'll automatically revert to the responsive design. But again, not all of the pages have been converted. If you want to see what the responsive design looks like on any device that you sign into, you can change this drop down to all devices. And then when you click Update Beta Program Preferences and you refresh your page, you'll notice that it essentially has a completely different look and feel. So, which is the point. Again, it'll be a little more modern, a little sleeker, and again, it'll adapt no matter what device you're using. The reason why this is not the standard, and the reason why we typically don't train in the responsive design is because we are still in what we call the beta phase. So we are still working out some of the kinks. And again, we haven't converted all of the pages yet. So just keep that in mind. As of right now, we still recommend keeping your laptop and your desktop on what we call legacy design. If you would like to keep it that way, make sure that this is set to mobile devices only. When I update again, it'll revert back to the legacy design on this page. And then finally on the bottom is where you can generate your own API key. This is actually a fairly new functionality for us. In as simple terms as I can put it, an API allows two different softwares to communicate to each other, essentially. So if you had a third-party software that you wanted to be able to communicate with CampSite, for instance, a very popular one is QuickBooks, then what you could do is you could generate an API, and then a developer or someone who is familiar with coding could create an API link, essentially, between the third-party software and CampSite. It's a little more technical. Honestly, it's a little past technically what I am able to explain in a clear and concise way. However, we do have API documentation. And if you ever have any questions or specific questions about it, again, feel free to contact us and we can get your questions, your more technical questions especially, answered by the proper personnel. The last thing that's permanent for everybody in this navigation bar here at the top is the FAQs section. So the FAQ section is similar to our Help Center in that it has a lot of helpful articles, tutorials, and step-by-step videos. The major difference is that a lot of these questions tend to be a lot more specific. And again, they also tend to deal with topics that most higher level administrators might need to know. Some of the more important, popular categories within the FAQ section is the opening and closing database years. So this actually deals with the tool that we call the rollover wizard. So in your second or third year with us, if you need to open up the next season, this is a good resource to teach you everything that you need to know about using the rollover wizard. And then also probably the most popular section is basically the same reason why we're here today, which is, again, every year we redo all of our training videos, and then we make those videos available to every single person that has access to the database. So these are technically the same trainings that we're going to go over the next 8 weeks or so. The only major difference is we do it every year to make sure that we are capturing the most accurate and up-to-date information. So any updates or changes that have been made in the last year will be covered since the last time that we did these webinars. So after today, if you wanted to see the phase 1 training from today, we'll probably post it later this week, probably about Friday, and then we'll replace the phase 1 training that's currently right here. So, and again, we'll do that over the next 8 weeks or so. So, any questions so far before I jump into user settings or permissions? And again, in the GoToWebinar dashboard, you have the ability to type a question and send it to me. All right. Again, if you have a question, you can put it in that section at any time. I promise I'll look at it. I do stop fairly frequently in order to double check for questions. So next, we're going to go over user settings and permissions. So in order to get there, I want to click Admin here at the top. And then I want to select the DB Management tab. Under DB Management, the very first section is Users. So this is going to show me every single person that currently has access to the administrative side of this database. Right? There's no limit to how many users you can have. You can have as many as you like. We never charge you any extra for how many users you have or anything like that. So feel free to add as many as you like. In order to add a new user, you would simply select Add New User, and then you would enter the basic information of that user. So their first and last name, their email address, and then you would create their first password. The password criteria is always going to be right here at the top of the page, just in case. Right. Once you create a user, and I can create one here. So once you create a user, it will refresh the page, and then you have the ability to set permissions for that user. By default, you'll notice that the user will have absolutely, sorry about that, the user will have absolutely 0 permissions. So the very first permission is DB management. DB management is what we consider the highest permissions within your database. So again, the admin level is what gives me access to the DB management tab. We typically recommend that not that many users have the ability to see the DB management tab, just because again, it allows you to add users, delete users, set permissions for other users, and then also gives you global database-wide settings here on the left-hand side. So most of the time, DB management is set for just a handful of higher-level admins. We also recommend that not just a single person has DB management access, just in case they get locked out or have issues logging in. The other permission under DB management is reports. We're going to go over reports very much in depth on our phase 3 training in a couple weeks. But the important thing to remember with this permission is that if you have this box checked, essentially it gives you admin level permissions for every single report created in your database, regardless of who creates it. It's a little bit of a change from our previous system, where essentially someone could create a report, and even if you were the owner of the camp, you wouldn't automatically have permissions to see or make changes to that report. This permission supersedes that, essentially. So no matter who creates a report within advanced reports or anything like that, you will automatically have the highest level of permissions for that report. So that's what those two settings do. Below DB management, we break down every single module you have within your database. And then if you click on a module, it breaks it down further into into different sections. And then every section will have its own individual permissions. The first permission that you'll see under every module is the ability to enable that module for that user. If this is the only box that's checked and all of the other boxes are empty, it means that the user will have read-only permissions within that module. They won't be able to change things or edit things. They would only be able to see information. So in order to grant them that access, you would want to make sure that either in each section, you go through the selections one by one, or you can also just do a blanket select all for a particular section. Most of the permissions are fairly self-explanatory, but for some of the ones that need a little bit more explanation, we have a blue question bubble next to them. And if you hover your cursor over the blue question bubble, it'll give you another sentence or two about what that permission entails. Now, again, by default, if you create a user, you'll notice that, again, technically they have absolutely 0 permissions whatsoever. However, if you're going to be adding a large number of users, it might save you some time in order to create what we call user templates. User templates is a way for you to create a predetermined set of permissions that you can grant to a user as soon as you create them. You may have noticed that when I selected Add New User, at the bottom of this window, there is a user template dropdown. So again, that allows you to give them a blanket set of permissions that you predetermined. So in order to create user templates, again, on the left-hand side, you'll see user templates. By far the most common one that we see across our camps is director. So director is normally the highest level of permissions. Typically they have everything. So, if you go through each module in each section, they typically have essentially everything checked off. So if you have several users that have that and you have a lot of modules, it could save you some time by simply creating a director template and then determining their permissions that way. Another really popular template that I see is nurse. Nurse is a very popular one. Most of the time because the nurse doesn't need DB management permissions, so I can skip that. But they do need camper permissions, at least everything except for financial information. And then obviously they typically will need medical info as well. So again, the permissions that you set are going to be based on the modules that you have in your database. So a lot of time when you're creating a user, it might not look anything quite like this. You may not have nearly as many selections as I have, just because I have a lot of modules that are active currently. But if you only have what we call the core product, then you would just see DB management, campers, and alumni. Those are the only three things that you would see. So it might be a lot simpler. Either way, again, you can create as many user templates as you like. You simply just need to give it a unique name. And then once you set the permissions for that template, you would click either Save Changes for this template, or you can click Save Changes at the bottom. Right? Now, when I go to create a new user, after I enter their basic information, I can grant them all of the permissions that are associated with the template that I select. While you can't change a user's template later, you can edit their permissions later as long as you have DB management access. Right? So some other things to keep in mind when you double click on the three dots next to a user's last name. Below permissions is email notifications. So these are automatic emails that are triggered when certain occurrences happen within CampSite. So for instance, under campers, let's say that our test support user here wanted to be notified every single time a new camper is created, every single time an enrollment form is submitted, or every single time a camper form, like a waiver, is submitted. So if I check those boxes and save my changes, literally every single time one of those things happen, test support here would receive a automatic email notification to the address that they used to log in. So there are many different notifications that you can receive, and it is on a per user basis. So just because you set it for one user doesn't mean that you set it for all users or for yourself as well. These three under campers are probably the most popular, but you also have the ability to get a notification for every camper enrollment, every time a session is changed, every time a camper is unenrolled, and then every single time a enrollment extra is purchased after the enrollment process. For family, you can also be notified anytime a family form is submitted. If you have the staff module, you can also be notified of several staff occurrences, the most popular probably being when a new staff application is completed, when a reference form is submitted, and when a staff form is submitted. And then under financial, again, not all of our camps have financials, but if you do, you can also be notified anytime a parent makes a payment through the parent dashboard, a notify of upcoming payment schedule installments, and then a notify of any payment gateway returns for any of our camps who are on Constellation payments as their gateway. So those are the most popular. Again, obviously there are ones I did not select, but below that is where you can change the first page that you see when you log into the database. So by default, it'll be that welcome to CampSite landing page that we saw previously. Technically speaking, you can change it to the camper dashboard, alumni dashboard, or if you have the staff module, you can also change it to the staff or staff lead browser. So very honestly, I normally recommend to my camps that they keep it on the default welcome to CampSite landing page. I tend to find that that page has more useful information anyway. So I would simply just keep it at the default for all users. And then finally below that is where you can change the password of another user. So a little refresh, if you click on your first and last name here in the top left-hand corner of the navigation bar, that's where you change your own password. In order to change the password of another user, you would want to go to admin, DB management, and users, double click on the three dots next to their last name, and then you'll see it here at the bottom. Again, the password criteria is up at the top, so that'll always be there in case. I would say the most common use case for this being used is when you have a seasonal employee or a seasonal administrator counselor that maybe hasn't logged in a while and they don't remember their password and things like that. And to make it easier, you simply just change their password for them. That's probably the biggest use case. We do have a forgot password link on the admin login page, but people can get stubborn when it comes to their passwords. So I know I do. Any changes that you make for this individual, click Save Changes for this user. We also recommend clicking Save Changes at the bottom of the page. Although it's a little redundant, we recommend clicking Save Changes just because that button is a little bit more prominent throughout the rest of CampSite, and it will save literally everything that you did on this page, not just the things you did for an individual person. Next to every user's last name, you'll see a padlock icon. When the padlock is gray, it indicates that the user's profile is unlocked, and therefore they have full access to the database, pending their permissions, obviously. If you double click on that padlock icon, you can choose to lock out that user. When you confirm your choice, the padlock will change from gray to yellow or gold, depending on your screen. So now the user has absolutely no access to your database whatsoever. Again, the most prominent use case for that is probably, again, a seasonal administrator that only needs access when camp is actually in session, but then in the off season, they don't need it anymore. Instead of deleting them and trying to recreate them, you would simply just lock them out and unlock them as needed. Also, if a user tries to log into the database with the wrong password 10 times in a row, it will automatically lock them out. Again, I know 10 times sounds like a lot, but people get pretty stubborn when it comes to their passwords. So in order to unlock a user, you would simply just double click on that padlock icon again. You would confirm that you want to unlock them here at the top. And then once you confirm, it'll change back from yellow to gray. Any questions so far on anything that I've covered? All right, moving on. So I'm gonna stay here for a little bit. Again, admin, DB management, and underneath users and user templates, we have drop-down lists. So drop-down list is going to be an area, quite obviously, where you can create as many custom drop-down lists as you prefer. During the enrollment process, and obviously during the forms creation process, you have the ability to create custom questions in order to collect additional information from parents. One of the response types that you can offer to parents is that they choose their answer from a predetermined drop-down list. So this is where you can create custom drop-down lists that you would associate with custom questions. Now, the very honestly confusing part about this particular page is that it's a mix of custom drop-down lists and standard drop-down lists that we give to every single database that we create. And from a technical standpoint, there's really no way to determine which one is which. Now, since I look at CampSite all the time, I happen to know that drink choice, lunch choice, sports, swim level, and t-shirt size, and yes only happen to be custom drop-down lists. The other ones will come standard across all databases. So when creating a custom drop-down list, it'll just be added into this list in alphabetical order. And the important part about the difference with custom drop-down lists and standard drop-down lists is that you cannot associate a custom drop-down list with a standard question, and vice versa. So you cannot associate a standard dropdown list with a custom question. So just something to keep in mind. In order to create a custom dropdown list, you would simply select Add New Dropdown List here at the top, and then you would give it a unique name. Again, as I said before, once you add it, it'll be added to this page in alphabetical order. Once you click on the name, then you have the ability to add values or answers into that list. The purpose of a drop-down list is obviously to standardize the way that parents answer a question. Instead of allowing them to type in whatever they want, you allow them to choose an answer from a drop-down list. So one of the most common custom drop-down lists that we tend to create for our camps is t-shirt size. So once you add values, and again, in order to add a value, you simply just type out the answer and then click add value. Once you do that, if you click on the 3 gray bars and hold, you can drag and drop the selections in whatever order you prefer. You can also make the answers for administrative use only in case you don't want them displayed to parents. In order to change that setting, you simply just double click on the text underneath that column, and then you can switch it to either yes or no. And then while technically speaking, you cannot edit a value within a drop-down list, you can delete that value and then re-add it accordingly. So if you find that something is misspelled or something like that, then you can, or you want to replace it with something else, then by all means, you can just delete it by double clicking on the red circle and then add a new value as needed. Now, the other confusing thing about this page is that just because a dropdown comes standard across all databases doesn't mean that you cannot edit the values within them. It's just that you cannot tie that list to a custom question. So some of the most commonly edited standard dropdown lists is probably the genders dropdown, the grades dropdown, especially these earlier grades. That tends to be more of a regional selection. Lead sources is another popular one, as that is a standard question about how parents heard about your camp. And I'd say that's probably it. Those are probably the top 3 that are edited as a standard drop-down list. If for whatever reason you want to take a standard drop-down list and add it to a custom question, the only way you can technically do that is by double-clicking on the 2 sheets of paper icon, and that will create an exact copy of the drop-down list. When you create a copy, then you have the ability to associate that with a custom question. And technically you can name it whatever you like as well. So moving on, the next section that we're going to go over is the camper setup wizard. In order to get there, I want to click admin at the top. I'm already under the admin menu, so I'm going to select campers here on the left-hand side. And then the very first section is setup wizard. So the setup wizard is a step-by-step tool that allows you to build new programs within your database. When you first sign on with us, your dedicated training and support specialist will do your initial setup. However, moving forward, the addition of any new programs or new sessions or anything like that should be handled by you and your team. In order to accomplish that, again, you should get familiar with the setup wizard. Now, I'm going to go step by step in this process, but keep in mind, obviously, you don't have to moving forward. If you want to jump to step 9, you can, but I'm going to go steps 1 through 9 in order. So the very first step is the request for information and new family enrollment form setup. So as a parent, filling out your, signing up for your programs, there is essentially 2 ways for me to create a profile within your database. I can fill out what we call the request for information form, or I can fill out the new family enrollment form. The major difference between these 2 is that the request for information will create the family's profile, but that's as far as it will go. It's basically a way for them to notify you and your team that they want to know more about your program, but aren't ready to sign anyone up just yet. When they fill out the new family enrollment form, not only will it create their profile, but it will also immediately thrust them into the enrollment process. So you don't have to use both, and parents don't have to fill out both if you don't want to present them with both. We found more and more that a lot of our camps are not using the request for information and are only using the new family enrollment form. A lot of camps have basically all the information that a parent could possibly want on their website. And again, most parents don't really like to talk to people anymore. They want to do their own research and, make their own decision and things like that. So again, these are two completely separate links that are associated with your database, so you don't have to use both if you don't want to. When you click on Request for Information or New Family Enrollment Form on the left-hand side, what it displays to you is the ability to edit the header text at the top of that particular form. So in order to edit that header text or add sort of any instructions or language that you prefer, you would need to do that by what we call the WYSIWYG. So the WYSIWYG toolbar, which stands for what you see is what you get, is very prominent throughout all of CampSite. Almost anywhere that you're able to add header text or instructions and things like that will typically be handled by this toolbar here. The WYSIWYG has a lot of the same functionality as a Word document. You also have the ability to include hyperlinks. You can include additional images. You can create tables, and you can also jump into the HTML source code if you're a little more tech savvy. So anytime that you want to edit the header text or language or instructions, you're almost always going to be using a WYSIWYG toolbar. Same thing with creating emails and things like that. So we do recommend getting familiar with the WYSIWYG as much as possible. Below the header text is the ability to reconfigure the sections of the new family enrollment form or the request for information. A couple ways that you can reconfigure it is, again, you can click on the 3 gray bars to the left-hand side of any section, and you can drag and drop them in whatever order you prefer. Right? This will literally rearrange how it's presented to parents on the parent-facing side. If you double click on the 3 dots next to a particular section, it will open up some of the individual fields within that section. And again, you have a lot of the same functionality when it comes to reconfiguring. You can drag and drop the sections in whatever, or the fields in whatever order you prefer. And then you'll also notice a mandatory and active setting. These are also 2 settings that are very prominent throughout all of CampSite. Active essentially means that a question or an option or whatever it might be is being presented to parents on the parent-facing side. So when it says yes, it means that that question or field or option is being presented to parents. If it's set to no, it means that it is for administrative use only. In order to change this setting, you simply just double click on the text underneath that column, and then you can change it to no. You'll notice that when you make something inactive, that it will italicize and gray out. That is a visual representation that we're just letting you know that that field or question or option is no longer visible on the parent-facing side. However, just because something is inactive doesn't mean that you as an administrator can't access it through their profile. So in order to edit that again, it also means that just because it's italicized doesn't mean that you cannot double click on it in order to change the settings. Right? Next to that, we have mandatory. So you can make questions mandatory or optional to answer. If they are mandatory, then it means that the parents must answer that question before CampSite will even allow them to move on to the next step of the process. So any information that you deem absolutely necessary to gather from parents should be made mandatory. If mandatory says no, but active says yes, it simply just means that while that question is being presented to them, they are not being required to answer it. So technically speaking, they can skip it if they want to. So in order to change that, again, you simply just double click on the text underneath that setting, and you can switch it to whatever you like. Now you'll notice under parent information and camper information, it looks like we're missing some basic fields. For instance, parent name, parent email address, and camper name. That's because those 3 pieces of information are the absolute bare bones minimum that we require in order to create a profile within CampSite. So we didn't put them on this page because we didn't want to give you the opportunity to even accidentally turn them off. So even if you make everything else inactive on this page, I promise that parent name, parent email address, and camper name will always be active on the parent-facing side, always. Right. So for some of these other sections, home address will obviously cover their home address as well as their home phone. Additional information will cover a lead source or how they heard about your camp. So again, that's tied to a drop-down list, which you can edit in the DB Management tab, which we just went over. Below that is where you can set the submission confirmation email. This is a saved email, which you can create and customize within CampSite. We're going to go over saved emails on our next webinar, how to create them, where to create them, things like that. But once they're created, this is where you would set the confirmation email that the parents will receive once they fill out all of the necessary sections on the new family enrollment form. Regardless of what you type out in the body of that email, the email is going to include a link to the parent dashboard, which is basically a portal where they can manage their entire account. It'll include a temporary password to the parent dashboard, as well as instructions on how to update their password once they log in. So that's hard coded into this email. You don't have to type that. It'll automatically be included no matter what. Right. Below that is for our camps that have the text messaging module. Text messaging is basically just another way of mass communication through your database, similar to emails. What this does, now there are different rules with text messaging as opposed to emails. So parents have to opt in to receiving emails from your account. So if you have text messaging, you can present the opt-in message to be displayed as soon as they create their profile. Again, if you have it when you first start out, we do recommend keeping this to yes for sure. If you're curious in the text about the text messaging module, you can always contact support. Or if you go to FAQs, we have a very brief text messaging training/demo in the FAQ section. Now there's one section here that doesn't have the 3 dots next to it. That is family questions. That is because family questions and camper questions are actually housed over here on the left-hand side. Camper questions, just so you know, are underneath the camper information section. So now these are custom questions that you would create from scratch in order to obviously collect additional information from the parents. The difference between family questions and camper questions is that family questions will be presented once per family, regardless of how many campers they have on file. Camper questions will be presented for every single camper that they create. So if you have 3 camper questions and they add 3 campers, they'll have to answer those 3 questions 3 separate times, essentially. Now, the one thing to remember with questions created here on step 1 is that the answers to these questions are considered permanent. So parents will only ever be presented with these questions once, and that is the first time that they create their profile within your database. Once they create their profile, they will never be presented with these questions again, and these questions are not editable by the parents. So if you have questions that need to be asked on a more frequent basis, then you would want to put them later in the setup wizard, which, to be fair, is much more common. There typically are not a lot of custom questions created here on step 1. Some of the more common ones I see on a family basis might be what is their preferred method of being contacted, like email or by phone. Sometimes I've seen it where, like, what county are they in? What church they go to, what the parent's occupation is, things like that. Now, some of those obviously can change, but they typically don't change year after year. So this is still typically the most popular place for those questions to exist. For a camper question, probably the most common that I see might be race or ethnicity. Sometimes I'll see nickname or middle name, things like that. But it's, again, more common that questions are presented later in the setup wizard, which I'll point out. Now, no matter where you are within CampSite, when you're creating a custom question, it's always going to be the same general process. So when I select add a question, I'm going to be presented with this window here. So the first thing that I want to do is type out my question. And this will obviously be, this is what is going to be presented to parents, right? That's the idea anyway. Once I type out my question, I would choose what sort of response I want to offer to the parents. So it'll always default to a small text answer. Small text answers are ones that are typically 100 characters or less, but it will allow the parent to type in whatever they want. Large text answers are ones that are typically 100 characters or more, but again, it will allow them to type in whatever they want. Dropdown list is going to pull from the custom dropdowns that we created in the DB management section. And then the bottom four are fairly self-explanatory. Yes, no answers, whole numbers, money or decimal, and then a date field. The only two that are really completely different is going to be header and paragraph. The slightly confusing thing about headers and paragraphs is they don't have any response fields. So they're not actual questions. A header is typically used for breaking up questions into different categories that all appear on the same page. Paragraph is typically used more for instructions. So as an example, let's say you have a series of medical questions that you want to add and you don't have the medical module. You might create a header that says camper medical questions. And then underneath that header, you may have some instructions like please answer the below questions to the best of your ability. Type NA if it does not apply. So the header would be camper medical questions, and the instructions would be a paragraph. Again, you're not expecting a response from either of those. They're just simply for informational purposes. The difference between headers and paragraphs is that a header is going to appear a little bit bigger and it's going to be in bold font, whereas a paragraph is going to be the normal font style like a regular question. Again, it just won't have any response fields. So once you choose your response type, then again, you can make this question mandatory or optional to answer and active or inactive on the parent-facing side. Once you create the custom question, if you want to edit some of the details, you can double click on the text underneath the question, mandatory, and active setting at any time in order to adjust those settings. If you want to change the response that you're offering to parents, you can single click on the type, and then you can change it to any of the other types within your database. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see a red circle, and you also, obviously, I pointed out the red circle when we were going over drop-down lists as well. So another big component of CampSite in general is that you're going to see a red circle or a gray circle to the right of many, many different things. Again, it'll be to the right of questions, sessions, options, many things throughout the database. The general rule of thumb is that if the circle is red, it means that whatever it is, you can delete and it has no ramifications throughout the rest of the database. Once someone answers a question or selects an option or whatnot, the circle will change from red to gray. And the gray circle indicates that you can no longer delete that question or that option or whatever it might be. The reason for that is normally because if you deleted it, it would have ramifications somewhere else in the database. And therefore, we don't allow you to delete it so that you're not messing something up unaware. So red circle means you can delete it. Gray circle means that you can't. In some pages on on CampSite, if you hover over the circle, when it's gray, it will tell you why you can't delete it. And I'll show you that when we get to step 2. So in order to delete this, I just double click on the red circle, confirm my choice, and then I will delete the question. The last thing here on step 1 that I want to go over is CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is for the very rare occurrence that you're receiving spam submissions or bot submissions. You've probably seen CAPTCHA on a bunch of different websites. If I set this to yes, it'll add a little checkbox at the bottom of the form indicating that whoever's filling it out is a real human being and not a robot. This is not very common. Most of our camps do not have this set to yes. I would only recommend having it set to yes if you're finding that you're getting a lot of strange registrations. Like if a camper's name is 14 ones in a row, then I would definitely turn this on. Last thing I want to point out, especially because it's a newer feature and something that we're going to see on every single page moving forward, but I don't want to point it out every single time. At the top of the page, you'll see this little blue eye icon, as well as this link that says how to use this page. Every single step of the setup wizard now has this, where if you click on the link, it will open up a new window, and it will basically tell you all of the different things that I just told you. So again, it even has links to different articles and things like that that we have created within our help center. So this is a really great resource. Almost every page in CampSite will have this at the top. So if you're ever curious on how to use a particular page or what you can do or anything like that, this is always going to be a good resource. And again, it will be at the top of the page. We're building this out currently, so not every page will have it, but we are building it out rapidly. So, and again, every step of the setup wizard will have this moving forward. So, any questions on step 1 before I move on to step 2? All right, so moving on to step 2. Step 2 is called sessions. So although it is obviously the second step, I tell my camps anytime that you're building a new program within CampSite, step 2 is typically the first place that you want to go. This is because step 2 refers to sessions are typically the foundation of any program that you're going to create within your database. When we use the term session, we're referring to a time frame in which campers can attend your camp. Now, step 2 here is a master list of all of the sessions that exist within your database. This is not how sessions are presented to parents. This is every single session that exists for your program. Now, sessions can be sort of any denomination of time. Minimum of 1 day, maximum, there's really none. So a session can be a single day, a session can be a week, which is by far the most common. A session can be 2 weeks, it can be a month, it can be an entire semester. So again, you can create as many sessions as you like. Most of the time, a session will represent a week of camp. Again, it's typically a time frame in which they can arrive or attend your camp, right? So in order to add a new session, you would select Add Session here on the left-hand side. When you're creating a new session, you need to give it a unique name. You would set the start and end dates of the session. You would select a capacity, if any exists, and then you would also select the active days. The active days refer to the literal days of the week within the start and end date in which that session takes place. Right? In order to edit any of those settings at any time, you would just double click on the pencil icon here on the left, and then you can edit any of those here in the top half of the window. As I scroll down, you'll also notice that there is a calendar modal here where you can set your own active days. So the active days that we have currently is all days within the start and end date, weekdays only, weekends only, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then the individual days of the week themselves. Right? Now that doesn't fit every single scenario. Sometimes you might have a different days of the week in which a session is active. And if a session lasts more than a single week, then you may have to use the calendar modal in order to create your own active days. One of the more popular ones is probably Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, obviously, if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I can just have the start date be Monday and the end date be Wednesday if I'm only doing a single week. But if I'm spreading it across multiple weeks, like for instance, this session, which is the after school fall semester, you'll notice that it is many, many weeks long. So because it only takes place on Fridays, I chose the Fridays only active days. However, maybe it's Thursdays and Fridays, so in that case, I can click on every single Thursday within the start and end date, and now technically this is a 2-day a week session. So The calendar modal will simply just allow you to choose or customize the active days that don't currently exist within our standard dropdown. Also, you have the ability to create what we call group capacities. So a group capacity allows you to better control the ratio of campers that will be submitting for this session. Typically, it's going to be based on the maximum capacity. So when creating a group capacity, you can set it based on the camper's age, grade, or gender. So for instance, I have a maximum capacity of 100. Let's say I want to do a 50-50 split between boys and girls, right? So I would want to create two group capacities, one for male, one for female, both for 50, right? So now this creates a little bit better of a ratio within my session. Group capacities are not exactly the same as restrictions. I'm not saying that only certain people can attend this session. We're going to get into restrictions a little bit later. What I'm saying is that of the people who are eligible to attend this session, I only want to break it down between, again, this age or grade or gender group. And you can do more than one as well. You can say like boys between the ages of 3 and 5. You only want 10 of those out of the maximum capacity, things like that. So again, the group capacity just allows you to sort of better control the ratio of campers who are eligible to attend this particular session. Any changes that you make to a session, make sure you click Update Session here on the right-hand side before exiting out of the window or before navigating away from this page. Okay. By default, all of your sessions will be listed in alphabetical order by name. However, you can also rearrange them by any of the columns that exist up here at the top. So if, for instance, if you want to see them chronologically, then you can click on the start date, and then you are looking at them in chronological order. So next step is transaction categories. Transaction categories, while technically being parent-facing, as they will see these categories on their statements and invoices and things like that, transaction categories are what I always consider more of an internal tool, because transaction categories allow you better reporting for the different transactions that exist within your database. So every transaction that is created within your database will have to be assigned to at least one category. You can create as many categories as you like. And again, typically it's more for financial reporting purposes than anything else. So in order to create a new category, you simply select Add New Transaction Category. You would give it a unique name. You have the option of giving it a general ledger code. Typically, a general ledger code is going to coincide with a third-party accounting software like QuickBooks or Financial Edge. Obviously, if you don't use those, then you can keep the general ledger code blank. You would also choose the years in your database in which this category is available to you when creating transactions. There is a character limit on categories. It's 20 characters, so just keep that in mind. Technically, I'm sorry, I didn't mention this before. There's also a character limit on sessions, but it's 50, which is fairly long, and so most camps don't meet that maximum. But once you create a category, if you double click on the pencil icon, you can edit the name of the category and the ledger code at any time. Just make sure you click Update Transaction Category. Right? There are two categories that come standard across all databases, even if you don't use them. Those two categories are cancellation fee and tuition. So those will always be there. You don't have the ability to delete them, and you don't have the ability to change their name. However, you can customize the general ledger code for those two categories if you want to. The next step is payment schedules. So payment schedules are thought of a lot like payment plans. Essentially, it allows a parent to pay their balance over time. I'm not going to dive too deep into payment schedules today because it's actually something that we go over very much in depth on our financial training. But with the basics, essentially, you can create what we call a payment schedule group. A payment schedule group will allow you to display different payment schedules based on the different programs that you run within your database. Typically, these are for my camps that will have year-round programs, right? And so, the programs that they run in the spring will have a different payment schedule than the programs that are run in the fall, because they take place at vastly different times of the calendar year. So it's popular to create different payment schedules based on, again, the different times of year in which different programs might take place within your database. Right? Once you create a payment schedule group, once you click on the name of the group, then you have the ability to create payment schedules. The payment schedules will allow you to, again, the idea is that it takes the family's balance and then divides it evenly over however many dates are on the schedule. So if you have a payment schedule with 3 dates, then essentially they will pay roughly 33% of their balance on each of the payment dates that you have. Right? Once all of the dates on a payment schedule have passed, then every program within your database by default will be considered pay in full at the time of enrollment. All right. So next step is tuition plans. Again, although this is step 5, I recommend that if you're building a new program within your database, this is normally the second place you would want to go to after you create the sessions. The reason for that is because tuition plan is simply just the terminology we use that refers to the cost of camp and will normally coincide with either a specific session or a specific number of sessions. Again, this is a master list of every tuition plan that exists within your database. So this is not how it's presented to parents. In order to create a new tuition plan, you just select Add Tuition Plan here on the left. You would give it a unique name. You would select the category from step 3 that you want to associate this tuition plan with, and then you would enter the dollar amount, or what we call the default amount, of that tuition plan. Once you create the tuition plan, in order to edit those settings at any time, you can double click on the pencil icon here on the left, and you can edit those whenever you want. If you change the price, it will not affect anyone who has selected that tuition plan in the past. It's not retroactive. It'll only affect families moving forward. On the far left-hand side of every tuition plan, you'll notice these 3 dots. If you double click on the 3 dots, it allows you to add what we call a tuition plan rate. A tuition plan rate allows you to charge the parents a different amount based on when they sign up for a particular program. By far, the most common example of a tuition plan rate is an early bird rate or an early bird special. So the idea in this example is that if a parent signs up sometime between July 20th and October 1st, they would be charged $80 to attend after 4 days of after school instead of being charged $100. Right? At midnight, or I guess it's 12:01, or on October 2nd, it will immediately revert back to the default tuition plan. Right? So when creating a tuition plan rate, again, you need to give it a name. The category should already default to whatever the category is of the original tuition plan. You would enter the start and end dates in which that new price takes place, and then you would enter the new amount that you are charging parents. This is an important distinction, as I've had several camps send in tickets where they say, like, why are my parents only being charged $25, or why are they only being charged $50? And it's because they entered 25 or 50 instead of subtracting 25 or 50 from the defaults and then entering that new amount. So keep in mind that it's always the new amount you want to charge, not the amount that you are discounting or adding to the default. And you can add to it as well, just so you know. So for instance, early bird is by far the most popular, but late registration is also very popular. And so you might charge them more if they sign up very late in the season. You do have the ability to go over the rate as well. There's nothing wrong with that if you wanted to. Right? So any questions on steps 2 through 5 before I move on? All right, so next step is enrollment extras. Enrollment extras refer to any additional options that you want to offer to parents while going through the enrollment process. Again, this is a master list of all of the enrollment extras that exist within your database. This is not how they are presented to parents. Across my camps, I've seen a very wide variety of enrollment extras. The most common ones are probably extended care, either before or after camp, registration fees, merchandise like t-shirts or water bottles. But I've also seen things like transportation charges, field trips, lunch options, things like that. I've seen a very wide variety of extras. The thing to remember with enrollment extras is that they are typically going to be charges that are on top of their tuition, and they are typically optional, but that's not always the case. So when creating an enrollment extra, just select Add Enrollment Extra here on the left-hand side. You would want to give it a unique name, and then the extra can either be by a fixed dollar amount or by a percentage of their tuition cost. You would want to choose the category from step 3 that you want to associate this extra with. You have the option of adding a description, so you don't have to if you don't want to, but I do find that a lot of my camps do, especially if it's a merchandise like a t-shirt or a water bottle. With the WYSIWYG in the top row, there's this image icon, and so you can add pictures of merchandise that you might sell as an enrollment extra, things like that. So that's why it's fairly popular for that one reason. And then on the bottom, you simply just enter the dollar amount or the percentage of the extra. In order to edit those settings, you would simply just double click on the pencil icon to the left, and then you can edit everything except for the type. Once you set it by amount or by percentage, it'll always be that type. In order to change it, you'd have to delete it and then recreate it accordingly. But everything else, including the name, the category, the description, and the amount, can be changed at any time. Now, while you create extras here on step 6, that doesn't mean that just creating them here will automatically display them to parents on the parent-facing side. There are 2 settings on step 8 and step 9, respectively, that allow you to display extras to parents on the parent-facing side. So don't assume that just because you created it here on step 6 that it'll automatically be displayed to parents. And I will point out exactly what I mean when we get to those steps. So the next step is enrollment discounts. This is sort of the opposite of enrollment extras in that obviously instead of increasing the parent's balance, it'll be decreasing it on a per camper basis. So enrollment discounts have the ability to apply to a parent's total either manually or automatically. So what that means when it says manually is that parents won't receive the discount until an administrator manually grants them that discount, typically during the approval process, or they will see it automatically as long as the camper meets all of the criteria of the discount. So when creating a new discount, obviously, again, you would select Add New Enrollment Discount. One unique thing about this is that you don't actually have to give discounts a unique name. They can all have the same name if you really want. Obviously, I would make sure that the amounts are different so that you can distinguish one from the other, but technically speaking, you can name them all the same thing if you want. Or have, obviously multiples of the same type. So, if you want 7 sibling discounts, then you could have that technically. So below that is the mode in which the discount will be applied. So again, either manually by an administrator or automatically. You can limit the number of times that a discount can be applied. So either once per family or once per camper. None just means obviously there's no limit. You would associate this discount with a particular category from step 3. You would type in a transaction description, which is mandatory. Again, the discount can either be a fixed dollar amount or a percentage of their tuition. And then you would enter the dollar amount or the percentage of their tuition. If you change the mode to automatic, another section will pop up here at the bottom of this window where you can choose the criteria of the discount. In order to receive the discount, the camper must meet all criteria that you create. So keep that in mind. The criteria that we offer, when you select Add Criteria, you're going to be presented with this second window here. So the criteria that we offer is based on what enrollment option they choose, what session they choose, the number of sessions, the siblings, either with enrollment requests or that are already enrolled, whether they're paying in full or not, the payment schedule or payment plan that they choose, the payment method that they choose, whether they are a new or returning camper, and then some of the more complicated ones based on not only the name of an enrollment option, but also the number of enrollment options that have that name. And that's the same for bundles and sessions as well. So I would say that our automatic criteria will meet about, honestly, 80 to 85% of scenarios out there. It's not 100%. Some of our camps have very specific criteria, and we can't accommodate every single scenario in which you want to automatically apply a discount. So sometimes discounts will have to be manual, but in a lot of scenarios, you do have the ability to have them automatically apply so that the parent sees them as soon as they go through the checkout process. If a discount is considered manual, technically the parent doesn't see the discount until they receive their first statement or invoice, just so you know. Whereas automatic discounts they'll see as soon as they get to the checkout page. Once you create a discount, if you double click on the pencil icon, you can edit any of the details at any time. I think the only one that you can't edit technically is if you create it as a manual discount, you can't switch it to an automatic discount later. But everything else you have the ability to edit, and you can make an automatic discount a manual discount later if you wanted to. But you also have the ability to edit criteria whenever you need in case you have to update it. So you would edit that by double clicking on the pencil icon. If you double click on this little orange icon, it allows you to create a copy or duplicate the transaction. So again, if you have a transaction or a discount that is very similar, maybe you're just changing one criteria point or you're just changing the amount slightly, then it's a lot easier to duplicate the transaction as opposed to creating them all from scratch every time. So just keep that in mind. The next step is the enrollment form setup. So this is a fairly large step. The first section that we're on is general options. And the very first two settings are to enable the enrollment form for returning families and for new families. Most of the time we find that these two settings are the same answer. They're either both yes or they're both no. The only time I've ever really seen it be different is maybe in your second or third year with CampSite. You want to give the returning family sort of a leg up on the competition. You may have this first one set to yes and the second one set to no. I've also seen camps do the opposite. They do vice versa as well. If both of these are set to no, it's basically the easiest way of turning off your enrollment form within your database. Technically speaking, parents would still have the ability to create a profile within your database if both of these are set to no, but they wouldn't be able to move forward with choosing any programs or adding any weeks for their camper or anything like that. So the easiest way to turn off enrollment for every program and every family is to have both of these set to no. And obviously when you go live and open enrollment, we recommend that both of these are set to yes, typically. Below that is the enrollment form processing mode. The processing mode refers to how campers are approved to attend your camp. Manual mode means that there is a approval process by an administrator. So essentially a camper isn't enrolled until a administrator reviews their enrollment request and then manually decides whether they want to approve, waitlist, or reject their request. The benefit of manual mode is that you can obviously review requests that come in, and you can also display non-electronic forms of payment during enrollment, like checks or cash or any custom methods that you may create. With automatic mode, there is no review process. So as long as the parent is choosing a session that has spaces available, and as long as they're providing a valid electronic form of payment, then their camper is immediately approved as soon as they finish the enrollment process. Again, there's no review by an administrator. So again, I would say that our camps are split about 60-40 in favor of manual. But for our camps that have a very quick and easy registration process, they're almost always an automatic. So if you're ever curious, let us know if you have any questions on those two processing modes. As I scroll down, the next one is the ability to allow parents to see the number of spaces remaining for each enrollment option on the enrollment form. This will do exactly what it sounds like, and it will refer to the capacity of the sessions that they choose. So if they are the first parent and they choose a session that has a capacity of 10 campers, and this is set to yes, it will show them that 10 spaces remain for that session because they're the very first camper. The next camper will see 9 spaces available, things like that. So just a way for them to kind of see like how many spaces are available. This is a global setting, so it'll be on it'll be for any session that they choose, not specific sessions or anything like that. As I scroll down, again, you can allow parents to make changes to enrollment question answers even after they submit the enrollment form. This is specific to questions that are created here on step 8, which I'm going to go over in just a second. And most camps have this set to no because they don't like the idea that parents can go in and change their answer later, especially because they're not notified that the answer was changed. It'll just look like that was always their answer. So a lot of camps will keep that to no. Below that is where you can count enrollment requests in the new and waitlisted queue against spots remaining. So again, this deals with the capacity of a session. And the idea is that, especially when you're in manual mode, any camper who submits a request will first be put into the new queue, and they're going to sit in the new queue until an administrator decides to, again, either approve, waitlist, or reject their request. What this setting does is it counts those campers in the new queue against the total capacity in order to try to give a more accurate representation of how many people have actually tried to sign up for that particular session. So again, let's say you have a session with 10 campers, 10 spaces, right? And there are 5 campers sitting in the new queue waiting to be approved. The 6th camper that comes along would see that only 5 spots remain, even though no one has been enrolled yet. Because again, it's assuming that everyone who's sitting in the new queue is going to be approved. So it's just trying to give a more accurate representation of how many people have already tried to sign up for a particular program by counting the number of people who are waiting to be approved. Right? As I scroll down, you can prevent the parents from submitting enrollment requests for sessions that have no spots remaining. This essentially toggles the wait list on or off. So if you want to allow them to submit a request for a session that is full, you want to keep this to no. If you want a hard cap on your sessions, so as soon as you hit 10, you don't want anybody else to even submit a request for it, then you want to switch that to yes. You can require a camper photo be uploaded before enrollment. When we say before enrollment, we mean literally right before. So if I select enroll Jack for 2021, before I get any further, CampSite will force me to upload a photo of Jack before I can get anywhere else. So obviously that must be set to yes in order to require a camper photo. And then finally, you can display your enrollment year in more of a school year format as opposed to a single year format. This doesn't actually change the functionality of CampSite at all. It simply just changes the wording on the parent-facing side. A lot of our camps are associated with schools, and therefore it is less confusing to say enroll in 2021-2022 as opposed to just enrolling in 2021. Especially this time of year when 2021 is closing out or getting close to closing out, then it might make more sense for a camp associated with a school or that run aftercare programs to have more of that school year format. So any changes that you make sure you click Save Changes here on the far bottom right-hand side before navigating away from the page. Staying here on step 8, the next section is instructions and terms. So there are 4 main pages involved in our enrollment process. The first step is where they select what programs or weeks of camp they want their camper to attend. The second page is where they answer any enrollment questions and add any enrollment extras. The third page is where they fill out any necessary forms that may be displayed during enrollment. And then the last page is the checkout page where they enter payment information. This section allows you to add instructions or language to the top of each of those pages to try to keep the parents moving through the enrollment process as seamlessly as possible. The most important section here on this page is probably the terms and conditions. Terms and conditions are any sort of mandatory rules and regulations that a parent must agree to in order for their camper to attend your camp. Terms and conditions, most camps will include things like their privacy policy, their refund policy, cancellation policy, things like that. So anything that you type here in this section, the parents have to check a little box indicating that they have read and agree to these terms. So they cannot finish their enrollment without agreeing to whatever is typed here in this box. Finally, on the bottom is an in-browser message that displays to the parents once they're done with the enrollment form. The wording of this section is typically based on what processing mode that you are in, mainly because if you are in manual processing mode, by the time they see this message, their camper has not been approved yet. They still need to go through the review process. Whereas if you are in automatic processing mode, by the time they see this message, their camper has already been approved. So that's why the wording will typically depend on their processing mode. Again, any changes that you make sure you click Save Changes here on the far bottom right-hand side before navigating away from the page. The next section here on the left is enrollment questions. So again, this is another place where you're able to create custom questions in order to gather additional information from the parents. The major difference with questions created here on step 8 as opposed to step 1 is that these are questions that will be presented to every single camper, regardless of what program they're signing up for, and it will be presented on an annual basis. So every year that they come back, they'll have to re-answer these questions. So again, t-shirt size is a really popular one, as most camps are dealing with campers who grow year after year as they are in that age range. So creating a question here is almost the exact same process. The only thing that's slightly different is that you do have the ability to show this question before enrollment options. It creates technically a 5th step, which we call pre-enrollment questions. Normally, camps will use this as a way to qualify or use conditional logic to display a parent with certain programs or certain options based on the answer to this question. So a really common one that I see is, especially like YMCA camps or things like that, they may ask if they're a member. And the reason why they ask is because they have member versus non-member pricing. And so they would create this "Are you a member?" question as a pre-enrollment question. And then based on how they answer that question will determine on the options that they're presented with on the following page. Another common one that I see is location. Some camps use like 3 or 4 different locations across the city, but a camper can only attend one location per year. So what they'll do is they will create a location question tied to a drop-down list, and then, based on what location they answer, they'll only be presented with programs that exist at that location. So basically, pre-enrollment questions is typically used as another way to restrict programs and options based on answers to questions. Right? If you want to edit the question at any time, you just double click on the pencil icon and you can edit any of the details at any time. Right. Below that is yearly enrollment extras. So this is one way that you can present extras created on step 6 to parents. Yearly enrollment extras will pull from the master list of extras from step 6, and the idea is that they're going to be displayed once per year, either on a per family or a per camper basis. So by far, the most common yearly enrollment extra is a registration fee, as it's only typically charged once per year on a per camper basis. Things like before and after care are typically going to be more session or week specific, and therefore those are going to be added on step 9, which I'll get into in just a second. But the extra must already exist on step 6 in order to pull it into this section. And then once you do that, you can also make the extra mandatory or optional and active or inactive on the parent-facing side. In order to edit those settings, you can double-click on the pencil icon, and you can edit the mandatory or active settings whenever you want. Below that is a yearly deposit. So a yearly deposit is the idea that a parent would pay an upfront amount regardless of how many sessions or weeks of camp a camper will attend. So basically it's like a once a year deposit. And you can do it either on a per family basis or a per camper basis. So this is the idea that, if no matter if a camper is attending one session or all 8 or 12 sessions, they only have to pay maybe $250 up front, kind of thing. So most camps have a per week or per session deposit, where the more sessions they attend, the higher their deposit will be. Again, that's something that can be done. It just would be done on step 9, which I'll show you in just a second. Below that is coupon codes. Coupon codes work pretty much anywhere you've seen a coupon code on any website. You create a coupon code, which can be up to 10 characters, lowercase letters and numbers only. You would associate it with a particular category on step 3. It can be a dollar amount or a percentage of their tuition. You would enter the amount, and then you would set an expiration date. The idea is that anyone that you give the code to, they can enter the code during their checkout, and then they would immediately see the discount taken off of their total. So the one caveat with coupon codes is that the only real restriction is the expiration date. There's no way to restrict a code so that it only works for certain families, or that it only works for certain programs, or that it only works a certain number of times. Basically, as long as the coupon code is unexpired, then anyone who has it can use it. So that's the way that we recommend using it. But I mean, again, it works pretty much the same way as it does when you enter a code on Amazon or anything like that. Passcodes allows you to add another level of restriction to a particular enrollment option. So basically, you create a secret password or a passcode, and then you associate that passcode with a specific enrollment option on the following page. Then only the families that you give the passcode to are able to enroll in that particular program. So again, it's very honestly not common. My camps who have a more in-depth process, or even an in-person process, maybe like an audition process or interview process, they might use passcodes, but in general, we typically have enough restrictions for camps to where they do not need to use passcodes. And then finally on the bottom, we have automatic email responses. So again, these are saved emails, which you can create and customize within the database, which again, we'll go over on our next webinar. And these are going to be sent out based on what processing mode that your database is in. Again, the idea here is that if you're in manual mode, by the time they receive this email, their camper is not enrolled yet. It's just a confirmation that they have completed the enrollment process, and there still needs to be an approval. If you're in automatic mode, by the time they receive this email, their camper has already been approved. So that's why you also have the option of attaching a registration contract, which is basically a PDF copy of the terms and conditions that they agree to. And you can also attach an updated statement, which will include any sort of deposit payments or anything like that. So basically, this is an email that will automatically be sent out once they have finished the entire enrollment process. So finally, we have step 9. It's the last thing that we're going to go over today, which is enrollment options. Again, although it's the last step, I always tell my camps that it is by far the most important when creating a program that you want to display to parents. I will also say very honestly that it's probably the most confusing step of this process, and I don't expect anyone to be an absolute expert, especially if this is your first time seeing this step. It does take a little bit of practice, and this is definitely a time where I would utilize the how to use this page, as we have a lot of articles and a lot of step-by-step instructions on how to use this step, and a lot of advice on how best to display programs based on your setup, as well as options that you want to present to parents. So now the thing to remember with step 9 is that it's basically combining all of the previous steps that we've seen into a nice little package, which we call options and bundles. Again, technically speaking, this is a master list of all of the options that exist within your database, but parents will only be displayed with options that their camper is eligible to attend based on any sort of restrictions that might exist for the option, which I'm going to get into in just a second. So when creating an enrollment option, you just select Add Enrollment Option, and then you would give it a unique name, and then you have to give it some sort of description. It might be just the date range in which that option takes place. It might be more in depth about like the program that is housed within that option. It really depends on you, but you do have to have some kind of description in order to create an enrollment option. You would also associate this enrollment option with a payment schedule group from step 4 if you want. You don't have to, obviously. Just keep in mind that if a payment schedule group is set to none, then all of the bundles within that option will be considered pay in full at the time of enrollment, despite what the deposit settings might say. And then finally, active or inactive will obviously just tell you whether it's being displayed on the parent-facing side or not. Right? Once you create an enrollment option, if you double click on the 3 dots next to the option, then it'll open up a series of tabs. The most important and the first is going to be bundles. So like I said, bundles will sort of tie together all of the previous steps that we've already seen into a nice little package. So it'll tie the sessions from step 2, the tuition plans from step 5, and any extras that you might have from step 6, and again, into what we call bundles. So when a parent goes through the enrollment process, technically speaking, the first selection that they'll make is the enrollment option. Once they choose the enrollment option, it will display them with the bundles within it. Then they would choose the bundle that they want to select. They're only able to choose one bundle out of the enrollment option. And then, depending on how the sessions are set up, they would choose the appropriate number of sessions out of a predetermined number of sessions. So in our example here, we have Camp Firewood. Camp Firewood is our more traditional residential overnight camp. It's an 8-week program, and obviously the parents can attend, they can have their camper attend anywhere from 1 to 8 weeks. So when the parent goes through enrollment, their first choice is that they want their camper to attend Camp Firewood. Once they select that, then they would choose how many weeks of Camp Firewood they want their camper to attend. And then based on that, then they would choose the specific weeks out of the 8 total that are available. So if I were to choose 3 weeks, then they can choose any 3 out of the total 8 weeks that exist for that program. It doesn't, technically speaking, with this setup, it doesn't have to be consecutive weeks or anything like that. It's just that they have to pick any 3 out of the available 8 that exist. So in order to create a bundle similar to these, you would want to select Add Bundle. You would give it a unique name. The name will be displayed to parents, so just keep that in mind. You would choose the number of sessions that they are able to select. You would then choose the tuition plan that coincides with that selection. And then you are able to choose the sessions that they are going to be able to select from. So this is going to be a master list of every session that exists for this year in chronological order, right? So right now, I'm allowing them to pick one session out of, maybe I want to do the weeks 1 through 3, right? So I just check the boxes of the sessions I want them to be able to choose from, but this is the number of sessions that they're actually able to choose. So right now, if I were to create this, and I can, then it would be a pick one of 3, essentially, any one out of those 3 weeks. As I scroll down, I can also choose whether any enrollment extras are going to be available from step 6. So maybe I want them to be able to do extended care for any of those as well. Once I select Add Bundle, then it'll ask me whether I want to require a deposit. And so if I don't require a deposit, obviously I can just click Save Changes and then I'm done. If I do require a deposit, it will make me choose the category from step 3 that it should be associated with. And then I can either make the deposit a fixed dollar amount or a percentage of their either full amount or just their tuition plan if I want to. Right? So make it 25. Once I've set that, so this bundle is active, and which means it's being displayed on the parent-facing side. So if they were to choose Camp Firewood, they would now see that there is a test bundle, and they can choose one out of any of these 3 sessions, essentially. Regardless of which one of the 3 they choose, they'll be charged $250, and they'll be expected to pay $25 upfront because they selected this bundle. They also have the option of selecting any of the enrollment extras tied to this bundle. So they don't have to, but they can add extended care for both AM and PM. With the enrollment extras, you'll notice you can make them mandatory if you want to, so you can sort of force an extra to be added to their total if needed. And then you can also make it available after enrollment. So if they're not sure if they want to do before and after care now, but they may want to add it later, then you can switch this to yes, and you're giving them the option to purchase this even if they've already finished the enrollment process. Even if their camper's already approved, they can still go back and add extended care if they want to, right? With this setting set to yes. So if you double click on the pencil icon next to a bundle, it will allow you to edit the name as well as the tuition plan and whether it's active or inactive, and you can do this at any time. If you click on the blue links under any of the columns that have blue links, so sessions, deposit, or extras, then you can add or edit the details within that particular column, right? So you can edit the extras at any time, you can edit the deposit at any time. The sessions are unique in that the sessions cannot be edited at any time. The sessions in a bundle can only be edited if that bundle has not been selected by an administrator. I'm sorry, by a parent. So you'll notice that, again, this has a red circle next to it, and that's because I literally just created it and nobody has selected this bundle yet. So because of that, if I click on pick one of 3, I can edit any of these session choices as needed. But all of the other bundles have a gray circle, and if I hover over it, it should tell me, oh no, I'm sorry, that's not step 2. I apologize. So the reason why it's gray is because it has already been selected by a parent. So if I click on pick one of 8 for 1 week, for instance, you'll notice that I don't have the ability to edit the session choices. So once someone selects a bundle, the bundle locks and you can no longer edit the session choices, right? If that happens, then normally you would want to just deactivate the bundle and then recreate it with the correct session choices. Right? I do believe we have an article specifically about that as well. So next to bundles, you'll see enrollment option questions. These are questions. Creating a question here is the same rules as it is throughout the rest of the database. The only thing that's different is that it'll only be displayed to parents based on if they are choosing this enrollment option or not. So sort of the most specific questions you can ask during the enrollment process. Restrictions allows you to obviously restrict this option based on their age, grade, or gender, as well as if they appear or do not appear on a saved advanced report. So the saved report is how we restrict options based on answers to questions that they are presented with before they see the enrollment options. And then age and grade and gender are obviously a little bit more self-explanatory and a little bit more popular. But basically, the restrictions will just tell you who is eligible to attend a particular option. So that's why as an admin, you're going to see all of the options here on step 9, but parents will only see the option that their camper's eligible to attend based on your restrictions. And again, you can edit the restrictions at any time. Passcodes allows you to add a passcode from step 8 and then associate it with this option, and then only parents who are given the passcode can enroll in this option. Again, not super common. Tags is a way for you to allow parents to sort of filter out what enrollment options they're looking at when they are on the enrollment page. Some of our camps have a very large catalog of programs that they offer to their campers. And so tags is a way to sort of narrow down the results that you're looking at. It's the same way where, again, if you're on Amazon, there's that left-hand column that allows you to only see products that are rated 4 stars and above. Only products from a certain brand, only products, of a certain price. Those are all tags, essentially. And this is the exact same process. So With tags, you can create as many as you like, and then you can associate them, a particular option with a particular tag. And again, it doesn't restrict the option, it just allows them to filter down what they're looking at on the parent-facing side. So in order to create a tag, you'll notice on the right-hand side of step 9, this enrollment option tools. So enrollment option tools allows you to create enrollment option tags, as well as mass archive enrollment options. Next to tags, we have payment schedule group. So again, this will determine what payment plans parents are presented with when they choose this particular enrollment option. And then the pipeline overview is a breakdown of all of the people who have selected this option into the different statuses. So that includes new, approved, waitlisted, rejected, and incomplete. The benefit is that if you click on the number, it will show you the camper that fits underneath that particular status. So for incomplete especially, it's an easy way to kind of see like what parents, which parents haven't finished. It won't tell you why, but it will at least tell you, they started the enrollment and for whatever reason they never actually finished up. So you can contact them and see if they need any help or anything like that. On the bottom left-hand side, you have the ability to duplicate an enrollment option. And then you can also archive the enrollment option. So archiving it, again, will hide it from the parent-facing side, but as an administrator, you will still have access to it. If you make any changes to a particular enrollment option, we do recommend clicking Save Changes here on the far right-hand side before navigating away or making any other sort of, moving on to a different enrollment option or anything like that. So that wraps up our phase 1 training. I went a little bit more in depth today than I probably normally would, but wanted to make sure I was covering as much as I possibly could. So any questions on anything that I have gone over today?